We got the commercialization panel, is that correct? All right. So the terms have been coming up, but what's a phase 3, what's commercialization, and all that. So I want to get everyone back on the right page as far as the terminology, and it is somewhat misleading, confusing, but a phase 3. Phase 3 refers to work that derives from, extends, and this is the new definition, or completes an effort under prior SBIR funding agreements, but is funded by sources other than SBIR program. The phase 3 work is typically oriented towards commercialization of SBIR research or technology to include commercial applications outside of government funding, but also commercialization funded by federal government, and then the continuation of research and development. So kind of more testing, more R&D dollars. So that's what quantifies as a phase 3. So when we kind of use commercialization phase 3, same thing. And the term of commercialization, Jim kind of read it. It's changed a little bit, but the process of developing products, processes, technologies or services, and the production and the production and delivery of. And then it says of the products, process, technologies, or services for sale to use by the federal government or commercial market. So we're talking about how do you get that extra money after SBIR. You're seeing more and more SBIR phase 2s have 2E programs, go above the typical $750 million, but you'll eventually want to get money that's outside that separate pot of money for phase 1s and phase 2s. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Lessons learned by individuals of how they've done that, both good and bad. There is no tool, method, one process that works for everyone. Even within the Navy, it just depends on certain circumstances. There's luck, there's all these things, but it's different than in NIH and other places. So on our panel today, they're going to kind of give us some insights on their experiences, and we'll open it up to questions too. We have Jack Lasser from MBF Biosciences out of Williston, Vermont. Brad Gordon out of SB Electronics from Barry, Vermont. Alan Cummins from Selden Technologies out of Windsor, Vermont. And Chris Pearson out of Sound Innovations, Inc. out of White River Junction. So I put together some questions for the panel. So I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of start with the questions, and then you guys have a mic, or I have the only mic? We have another mic, because I wasn't planning on sharing mine. All right. So what are some of the things that you've, these guys have gotten the questions before, hopefully, so they'll have some answers. What are some of the things that you've done or your firm has done to help and had the most value in helping with commercialization or transitioning your technology to bring in money from the federal government?
Wow. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, my arms aren't long enough. We've done a few things. The most successful thing that we did at MBF Bioscience is to find partners in the academic world that also had grant funds available. So we worked with people like MIT. As we were developing our product based on the SBIR program, we were looking for partners in academia that would be interested in kicking in some additional research money. So that when we got to the end of our phase 2 period, number one, we had customers who were ready to pony up some money and buy. But we also were able to leverage customized software based on the original program that we were working on. So we tweaked it a little bit for 1 or 2 big clients. And that gave us, in one case, everything that we needed to do in order to become a successful commercial product.
This is Alan Cummins. Very early in the game, we identified the Special Operations Command in the military as being an important avenue to commercial success with our water purification technology. We're a nanotechnology company. We've invented a new media that cleans fluids. First target markets are drinking water, so we have mobile point-of-use water filtration that is superior to reverse osmosis, doesn't add chemicals to the water, doesn't require power. So when you look at the needs of the warfighter in a mobile setting, we realized that the early adopters in the military setting no offense or not the Navy, but the SEALs or MARSOC or the Special Operations Command broadly. So in the early days, as we were developing prototypes, I was making trips down to Fort Bragg and working with people there who were working on water, and they helped us improve the prototypes along the way. So by doing that, we started to get known. We got invaluable feedback from them. We got support when we were going to get money, and our early adopters and first customers are now the Special Operations Command, not only in the United States but abroad.
You know, for us, it was key early on to recognize that yes, money was out there, but that we had a lot of history that we could already build on. We had other programs going on a different division that we were able to leverage, you know, our history with, to go out to investors, to go out to the angel community, and look for funds at that level, because the key thing for the SBIRs is that you have to know from the get-go that it's going to move toward commercialization. It can't just be, you know, a phase one kind of prove out. You have to always know that you're moving in this direction, so getting those relationships built well in advance before the topic is even known or announced is key. The second there is, again, as I believe Jack said, other customers out in the marketplace, you know, other companies to partner with, again, to develop both the client base, to have future sales, but also to demonstrate that there's a need within the industry for the idea, but for the product, and specifically for your company to have that support is really key. And again, that's where ultimately the money's going to come from well after any SBIR funding is out.
Well, I might talk about some of the learning we've had on what hasn't worked as well for us, and what I think will work better going forward, leveraging some of what we've heard. Our company took a technology from a university for noise canceling in headsets, and our first funding came from the Army in a phase one SBIR, and they wanted an earplug with active noise reduction for their pilots and their air crew. And we've been able to turn that into a fairly good funding stream. But what we've lacked in that process are the early adopters that build up the grassroots supports, which keeps us going. So we took this phase one into a phase two, and really by chance, around the time we were in our phase two, the Air Force came out with a requirement to develop retrofit noise reduction technology for their aircrew helmets. And so we won a contract to take our SBIR technology and build a retrofit product for pilots. But in the Air Force kind of big system development process, they wouldn't let us engage with pilots. You know, so we were going through this long development path without any ability to work with pilots in the field like we might have with the Special Forces type of arrangement. And then the Air Force came out with a new helmet development program, and the maker of the company that won that helmet development program, on the basis of our other work, selected our product for that helmet system. They wanted a helmet system that was earplug based, and they wanted active noise reduction. And so we had this promise of this big program that would have millions of dollars of sales when or if it got to market. And what we found in that is, in some of these big military programs, they tend to run late or delay quite a bit, and there's a number of walls set up between you and the end user. So it has great promise, but it's actually tough to build up that group of early adopters that you can build a base of strength from. And just this past December, we found out that this helmet program had been canceled due to things we couldn't control. So I think and so there's a lot of phase three money in there, but we didn't have a product revenue stream which came out of it, which is the key to sustainable business. So I think the lessons we've drawn from it, and that we've been starting to work on the last couple of years, is building that group of early adopters who you can become your customers. And in our case, we're starting to branch out into private pilots who we can work with directly. We're starting to make contacts into the Navy SEALs who can more readily be an early adopter for us and help get some more commercialization money. And we're starting to broaden out into other areas. But it was, for me, an interesting point to not rely too much on a program. And if I could go back in time, I would press much harder on working with a group where we could get a set of early adopters that we could work with in the field.
Great, thanks a lot. And the other guy, you guys will have a chance to answer what didn't work too later on. But what I heard out of that is both in the failure and the ones that worked is multiple markets is important. So, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You never know. It is very unusual for a defense program to go over budget and past schedule. You don't see that normally, so I was kind of surprised by that comment. But those things happen, cancellations happen, and you're going to see a lot more of it. Never in the past, in my history, working for 20 plus years, did you ever see admirals kind of get canceled because programs were beyond budget and delayed? And that's happening more and more now. Now, the downside of that is that people are no longer taking risks. So they're going to go back and say, wow, that's an SBIR company, they're a mom and pop shop, and I need somebody that I can trust. So we're going to see more pressure to be on schedule and under budget, and you're going to see more pressure to reduce risk, which is a challenge, and it's why we're trying to do more to mature things. But again, it's part of that early planning. So you even heard one talk about, during that phase 2, really start to work that phase 3 guy, and someone else said no before I even write a topic. One of my, I've got a company I worked with a lot early on. That was his key thing. Before you write that proposal, look at that topic, know exactly what the market is, who your customers are, that I've got a good reputation with those guys, that I know what they want, and it's not just one. I've got the second and the third behind it. And if all that matches up, I write the proposal, because as we've heard, I'm going to lose money on the phase 1, and he would lose money on the phase 2, but he was planning. So, the key message is never put all your eggs in one basket. Continue that marketing, at least during that phase 1. Be really working that. And really, what you didn't hear, but I'm sure it's the case from these guys, is it's not just that government person working, but it's also the private sector. You got to sell both sides, and they don't always talk to each other. So you want to make sure that the government guy is going to support it and push it and try to help you into the prime, but also the same thing from the prime. And a lot of times it's sub-tier guys. So on the helmet stuff, it's not your Lockheed guy will probably have a weigh-in on what goes in on his airplane, but it's probably a sub-tier to a sub-tier who's actually making those helmets that then feeds into the system. And if they're not all working and they don't all kind of say, yeah, I like that technology, it's going to be more challenging for it to commercialize. So I think those are some good lessons. The next question gets into how do you get help? So a lot of we got a lot of engineers in here. Any engineers? Yeah, a few of them. How many marketing guys we have? Oh, wow, well, you don't count. A couple, with an engineering degree, though, I'm sure. Okay, yeah, so that really doesn't count. So engineers typically don't like, I love to talk to companies and saying, would you rather hire another engineer or would you rather hire a marketing guy? They're like, that's an easy answer. That is always a challenge, and it doesn't always make sense to hire marketing people earlier on, but the kind of question is did you find, whether it's, lawyers or marketing people or organizations outside of your company as you were moving along that provided good assistance, and especially kind of think of back in the days when you were a smaller firm and didn't have the diversity. So what are the kind of the key, maybe it's in a specific organization, but what type of organizations can you kind of tell those guys to go out and look for that can kind of help you through that, whether the type of people or the organizations?
Yeah, that for me it's a no-brainer, and it's the marketing. We didn't have enough money to hire a full-time marketing person, so we went with a company that was a marketing consultant. And what they did was everything that I didn't know how to do as a small business owner and entrepreneur. I didn't know how to make a website. I didn't know how to make photographs and text that actually would sell your product instead of describe what your product was. I was very good about listing all the specifications, but that's not what it takes in order to take that to a customer and turn it into sales. So number one, and I do it again in a heartbeat, is hire a marketing consultant and a firm that actually can produce marketing collaterals for you. And number two, and I don't want to give a plug for lawyers, but having a really good intellectual property lawyer who can help with things like patents, trademarks, copyrights, agreements, making sure all of your employees had agreements that signed over the inventions to you. It became invaluable for me. We were involved in 2 lawsuits in the first 5 years of our company, and without having a good lawyer, we would have been gone.
Also, kind of add, how did you find those good people? How do you go out and figure out who is good and who is not?
Well, I'd love to say places like this, making contacts and then word of mouth. For me, it's always been finding people through a network rather than just going to a phone book and digging people out of the phone book. Who was it? He was the guy. He's no longer around. He was in Burlington. Ken McMahon. He had a company called First Impressions, and he moved down to Florida. A lot of people leave Vermont after, this time of year, you want to leave Vermont too, right?
Well, people who helped us along the way, and I'll second the need to get a good patent lawyer at the earliest possible moment, get your patents in place, helps you with these government contracts, and that was very important. We also looked at the industry organizations. For us, the Water Quality Association is a great resource. Go to their trade shows. You're going to meet a lot of people and understand who's out there. I can't stress enough in terms of marriage making, use the Vermont congressional delegation. They want to grow jobs. They want to grow businesses in Vermont. They and their staffs have been tremendous help to Selden along the way. And if you're not talking to them, you should be. That goes for the governor. Governor Douglas put us in touch with the whole EB-5 visa program that you may be aware of here in Vermont. Vermont's the most successful state in the United States using that program. We have a project, and we are raising money through that as a result of Jim Douglas pulling me aside at a cocktail party and saying, you really ought to do that. So there have been a number of people, resources that you can turn to that we use. Actually, our regional planning group down in Springfield has been a tremendous help as well.
Well, Alan mentioned trade shows, and I'll start there. That was really one of the biggest keys for us early on with our new product that we were bringing out to the market. We had a very early part, sitting on a table at a trade show when a rather senior official from GM, General Motors, walked up to the table, saw it, took an incredible interest, talked to us for a good long time. And his comment was, I'd love to see that in an electric vehicle. Lo and behold, we'd never thought about that possibility, but that has turned into, now 10 years later, an $18 million project with a new manufacturing facility and a facility capable of supporting 100,000 electric vehicles per year. And that's not something we even thought. So again, going back to having those key partners to help open your own horizons beyond what you otherwise thought was possible. But then to continue on the partners piece, it's critical too that you have quality partners. It's not just about volume, but really you're looking for companies that are known within industry, respected within industry, that DoD or DOE will recognize and support, that they have a stable base of support, and having someone who has won an SBIR clearly is beneficial as well. In the writing phase, you may have discussed it earlier, having someone with a PhD, having someone that has the background, again, that DOE and DoD will recognize and support is really critical. We have an incredible group on staff, and when we were submitting our first SBIR proposals, we had what we thought were very good applications with the help of Mark Blanchard, somewhere in the back, but still didn't win because we didn't have the certain credentials that the agencies were looking for. And the last thing I'll mention would be Oak Ridge National Labs, your national lab contingency out there. We've been working with them for, again, a number of years, going back to our phase one and now continuing and through Phase 2 and our manufacturing grant through an ERA-funded program at DOE as well. They continue to be a partner, and any project that they're working on that has a capacitor that needs roughly our requirements, they're always using us, and that's a huge stamp of approval to have a ranking national lab in your corner when it comes to proposal time.
Is this in relation to SBIR specifically or business in general?
It can be both, yeah. Business in general, developing the company, sure.
Well, so I guess in terms of SBIR quickly, maybe my better example is with the Phase 3. Last year we won a broad agency announcement from something called the CTTSO, who wanted a firefighter communication product. And there was two things that was critical to getting that award. One of them was having a corporate partner. We decided to partner with someone who had a lot of credibility in that market space, and that would be our commercialization partner. And I think without that, we wouldn't have gotten in the door. But then in terms of actually getting the funding in a tough budget year, we had support from Senator Leahy's office, and that was another critical component. Because we're very good on the science side internally, but it's the commercialization part where we've needed to reach out in a few cases, and the Senate in the congressional delegation really makes a difference. And I think for now almost any SBIR I put in, I'll get a support letter from the Leahy office. They're extremely helpful, as is the entire delegation. In terms of general business, we're still very much a startup, and even though I'm on the business, I have a business background, I'm not an engineer, I've still built out advisors and a board of people who can have expertise that I don't have, or experiences that I don't have. In my case, we came out of Dartmouth, and that's where a lot of my network is, and my advisor and board group is almost exclusively out of that Dartmouth network, because it starts with people that I get to know and trust, and we build on that to link to people. We're now expanded that network to the Vermont Seed Fund, who's invested in our company, and they've made connections for us that we're now bringing into the advisory side. So I think to me it's been very helpful to have on the business side advisors who I can talk to that have a different experience set. And to me, it's just been a matter of networking, starting with groups I know and trust, and building out from there. And I would agree on the legal side, having good legal counsel is something that we started with from the beginning. I think you can do that in a way that's not you have to spend a little bit of money, but I think you just have to use it in the right instances. But it really does matter. I think also in marketing, probably it's not a place to start out with the first full hire. When I say marketing, I'm thinking of the collateral website, things like that. There's a lot of good outsourced firms. We're now, as we get into true product development, so first started technology development, now building products, we're working with firms that have industrial design as part of it, which is really important, so we're not putting out something that looks like an engineering product. It's a product that's geared towards a consumer look. The one thing that I wouldn't outsource would be direct connection with the users. So if you have a customer set, I think it's really important to engage with them directly. I wouldn't outsource that piece of it, but there's a lot of these execution pieces where partners can be very helpful.
So we kind of heard, don't go it alone. I think it was the message in all of these. But especially early on, bring in marketing, IP help. They use the congressional, and I can't stress that. I mean, it is valuable to use those. Honestly, letters from a senator don't mean anything to us, or they shouldn't mean anything to us. But the doors that they can open to say, hey, look at this, what are your thoughts on this? Letters of support, not so much, but to give you opportunities to get into us to look at something, especially if it was outside SBIR, we will and we have to, and we'll have to get back to you on that. So, I mean, I think that's a great source. And then, networks, associations, universities are really key and great sources to do that. And we heard, and I think it's a key thing of developing a board of advisors early on. And a board of advisors is a really valuable tool I've seen for a lot of companies, especially, hiring some ex-military folks and things like that, depending on what your market's going to be. Where can you get people that have worked in those spaces and can open some doors for you? And it's an interesting one about the federal labs. I think you're going to see that grow because, A, the dollars going to the federal labs are going to go down. I don't know if a lot, but definitely, and it'll vary, DOE maybe not so much, but Department of Defense. But you're seeing in the SBIR legislation this push that we're supposed to use more federal labs. And actually you're seeing in other pieces of legislation more use of the federal labs. And so all the federal labs have the Federal Laboratory Consortium, FLC, which is an organization that is the network of all the federal labs, and they all have what's called an ORDA, and I forget what that exactly stands for, but it's their tech transfer person, like the universities have at the labs, and they are a great resource to help you with, is there patents there, is there technical expertise there, and I think it does certainly add a lot of credibility in spaces that you may not know the science, but then what's the application in those different areas, and they can bring in some help there. So I think those are some great ideas and trade shows and associations and things. So our next question, and actually I'm going to ask two, because one I thought of as we were talking through this is, you talked about, we applied to this other BAA and this other RFP. I know it's really simple to just go on to FedBiz Ops and quickly pull up, the RFP that's perfect for your company. It's a nightmare system. It's very difficult and challenging. So maybe we can talk a little bit. I think it's too easy of a comment, well, yeah, we found this other BAA. How do you find those other BAAs, those RFPs? How do you find those other sources of government funds? How much time do you spend on that? And there's some lessons learned of, the best way to go through those things. Is that something you contract out, or how did you do that? It's not on the questions here, but I thought you guys could touch on that.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. In my company, we've had really good track record with the NIH and to a lesser degree the NSF. And what we're trying to do is break into the DoD a little bit. So we're always on the lookout for the solicitations that are put out, and they're usually done, I think, quarterly or every year. Depends on the agency. There's a lot of good programs that set you up with this solicitation announcement email so that, Mark, you're shaking the PTEC.
Right. So we're talking outside of SBIR.
Outside, yeah, these are agencies like the state of Vermont actually has one that.
The PTAC, right, and she stood up earlier. There you go.
Yeah.
And that is a great source for you, right?
Yeah, so I get these emails sent, I think they're every week or every 2 weeks, that let me know about new announcements that are out there. And the thing that, trying to break into places like the DoD and DOE, we've tried, and I don't recommend this, but we've tried looking for solicitations that are really close to what we do, and then thinking that we can just put a little spin on it and sell our technology. And it's become clear to me after 2 or 3 of these submissions that unless you really have exactly what they're looking for, it's not worth a try. It's a much better approach is actually to call up the officer who's in charge of funding and pitch them your idea offline. And hopefully they will actually write another solicitation because you've done a good job pitching your technology to them, and that will be the one that you respond to, which they fund.
I would agree with that last comment. We do the web searches when the announcements come out and look for things that are in our core competency. But probably the most helpful thing that we ran into is that the Office of the Secretary of Defense has a science and technology committee group. And we were able to get an audience with them, and they call themselves marriage brokers. And they basically, I remember one furious afternoon where we were just writing down names and points of contact And we went on the road, and we went out and pitched whoever would give us a meeting. And through that process, we got a lot of intelligence about, oh, there's a BAA coming out, or oh, there's this, you might fit into that. And you really, there's no substitute to getting in front of somebody in the beginning with your technology to get partnered up.
A few things here, and I'm going to go back to our relationship with Oak Ridge National Labs. Having a very close connection and relationship with some key officials down there, we often get some word ahead of time or as some proposals come out of things that could fit our sphere of influence. And in addition to Oak Ridge, actually people directly at DOE as well, to again continue to foster those relationships. And once you've garnered that respect with those individuals, they are very complimentary and helpful down the road. But again, going to the trade show piece as well, when you find that you've gained a certain relationship with other larger organizations, again, going back to people like GM and such, those individuals tend to have some advanced knowledge of some of these proposals as well. And if you're lucky, they will give you a little hint as to what they know and maybe partner on one of their projects or take a prime lead as well. Has been an option for us. In addition to just really trolling the DOE and DoD websites for the solicitations. And as you'll find out, once you win one of these things, you become connected with at least a half dozen different websites that you have to register on. In which case you can monitor some of the flow of FOAs coming out that way as well.
In our case, we use Vermont Bid Match, which Scott Holston set up for us with keywords, and so every day I get an email that has a kind of pre-screened list of topics that might relate to us, and it's more often than not that there aren't a direct relationship, but I'd say there's probably 8 opportunities that come up every year through that screening process, and it's just a matter of taking a quick scan over an email. I think on the DoD side, I would echo that a lot of times these have already come out written for someone, and so it's very tough to win an award that's already been solicited. We had some luck in winning truly an open competition in earlier ones, but we're starting to try and get better at finding people we can work with in the DoD who might start writing solicitations. We're doing something that they want to get done, and then they can put us into the SBIR plan going forward. And lastly, we did for a few years use someone in DC who was, let's say, a business development person that was well connected, and that's actually where one of our current contracts came out of. He was at a CTTSO broad agency announcement. It's called the Counterterrorism Technical Support Office. And in that case, a topic came out that he thought might be related to us. He talked to the program manager at the event, told him about our capabilities. They ended up changing the topic slightly because this was a pre-solicitation. And when it came out, it was something that was directed towards us that we could apply for. I think that there's a little bit of luck in that, but I think it also speaks to just having getting to know these people and these agencies, being part of the pre-solicitations for agencies that might have relevance to you, because there is some opportunity to shape topics sometimes.
Good comments. So now we're going to kind of go into what are some of the things that you wish you didn't do, both from a commercialization standpoint, but also from just a company development and growing the company. What are some of the things that you've learned that you thought would have helped a lot and maybe actually hurt more that you would like to avoid?
Is it wish we did or wish we didn't do? I'm sorry, didn't.
You don't have to have necessarily done these things, but experience is probably the best. So things you did that you wish you probably hadn't done, or maybe hurt more than you wasted time and effort and funding on.
Sure. Well, first I'll at least mention one of the things that I wish we did that we didn't do in the beginning. When we were getting started, wrote our first SBIR Phase 1 application, I thought it was so much money. We actually got a commercial product out of it, and I thought, why bother writing Phase 2? That was like one of the dumbest things I've ever done. Once you've gotten Phase 1, the Phase 2, if you've done a good job at your Phase 1, your Phase 2 is so much easier to get. And I don't want to say it's free money. You definitely have to work for it. But it is such a great way in order to leapfrog your R&D. If you want to put your own money into it, you can do it, but it'll take a lot longer. So one of the things that I wish I didn't do, I guess I wish I had paid better attention to some patent aspects. And again, it's another one of these legal things where being a software guy, I originally thought, oh, the open source world, if you have a good idea, it shouldn't have to be patented and so on. I had an idea for a product and started working on this idea, came out with the product. 5 years later, someone else patented my idea and turned around and sued me. It's another company. So you need to protect your IP. You have got to do it. As a business person, you can't pretend that the world's a good place and you're going to, everyone else is going to play by the rules.
Just a couple comments as far as within the government programs. I don't think we did a very good job early on with using the question period and getting in touch with the people who were there to answer questions before that period closed and you had to submit your applications. So I think we did poorly with that initially, and we've gotten better now because that can be very valuable. As far as commercialization money outside of the getting to phase 3 with non-government money, we've had the experience of doing a joint development agreement and leading to a product with a major company that didn't work. And in retrospect, I think we might have done a better job of making sure that our interests were more closely aligned with that company before we spent a considerable amount of energy getting into the joint development agreement. Sometimes you can't do anything about it. A major company will change its goals, and you can get left dropped, which is what happened to us because we had a company who thought they wanted to go into water purification. They weren't in it, and they decided they didn't want to get into water, and it was basically 18 months of lost effort. So being very careful with your selection process and your industry partners would be something I think we could have done better.
For us, it's not something I would say that we necessarily regret doing, but it certainly didn't work out for us, is that we had to lose a few in the beginning. If you look at the statistics, it's maybe 1 in 5 chance of getting one of these awards here in terms of number of proposals. So we lost a few early on, even as I said, with Mark's excellent help, drafting some of our early proposals. It took a while to learn what we really needed, and where the disconnect was is that we were trying to push what we already did on topics that didn't necessarily fit. So there really has to be a fit with what you're looking for, because ultimately these SBIRs, and I was talking to Scott here before, these are really indicators of what are going to happen 10 and 20 years down the road. The DoD and DOE have a vantage point that is well beyond any of that which any of us have. So really be focused on the fact that you and your company have a certain skill set that you can leverage to then build something that really fits what the DoD or DOE are looking for. You can't ram something down their throat because they're just not going to take it. There really has to be a fit for them.
One quick comment on the phase 2 in terms of applying for that before I get to some of the things I've learned. This first Army phase 1 we then got a phase 2, and then the Army had 2 continuation programs, and we've since had 2 extension programs to the phase 2 that have been about 1.2 million total. So those aren't phase 3s; they're still technically phase 2s, but you can actually get a lot of out of one SBIR program, and so that's something to keep in mind. And even when you get to phase 2, you should be seeing what extension programs the service or the program has, and do the best you can to get that 2B, 2+, whatever they call it, funding. In terms of some of the things that we've learned, the guy talked about how we relied overly on one program. I think also early on we thought we might be a licensing, developing technology and licensing it, but we weren't really willing to give up the control we'd have to give to truly strike a licensing deal. So I think we're somewhere in between. We wanted kind of the control of a product company, but we thought we were going to license. And I think what we've come around to is that what we really want to do is develop and sell products under our brand name. If we had figured that out from the start, I think we would have approached things differently. I would have gone back and started with a group of users or customers, work with them very closely early on so that I could be prototyping and developing relationships at that stage. We spent a lot of wasted, really months and years trying to strike industrial deals, and we've developed some very good relationships with industrial partners, but we could never come to an agreement because when you do a licensing agreement, a lot of the risk is really on the commercialization side, and you have to give up control, and you're going to have to give up a lot of the value, and we just weren't willing to do that. And I think where government moves slow, industry moves very slow. So these corporate deals take a long time, and then you can get the deal, and then priorities change. So that's worth keeping in mind as well. So I think almost the biggest lesson we've learned is we're not giving up on doing any partnering, but we want to have at least one market that we control, so that there's no one who can put a block between us and selling something. It's just a matter of us executing to get there.
Great. Those were some good lessons. I think that's the last of our questions. We've kind of covered some of the other stuff. I want to open it up to the floor to ask some questions, and actually we can, with it being kind of the closing, any questions to anybody, Mark or Scott? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I have a marketing question follow-up to what Alan told me. Thanks. I have a marketing follow-up question to what Alan told us early about your going down to the base and working with the SEALs. Were those effectively beta testers, or were they paying customers?
No, they were interested in the technology. We weren't paying them.
I mean, were they paying you?
No. All of that effort was part of our product development.
So kind of like beta testers, in effect?
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Great. Okay.
We did one of the things we did an awful lot of was do field testing all over the world. We would send product out with either the Special Operations Command. I mean, wonderful stories. A military trainer took one of our water sticks and drank out of the Nile for 2 weeks. Didn't get sick. That's a great story to pass along.
That's a beta tester from heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Oh, we're all that tired?
I've got a couple comments I'd
Yes,
make.
actually, and you guys feel free.
There's a couple things I'd pass along to you that you're aware of, I'm sure, but I can't stress enough. When you're working with your government, make sure that your financial systems infrastructure is in place. You understand government contract reporting requirements, and you pay a lot of attention to that. We did with the Air Force and the other people that we worked with. We get high marks when they audit, but I'm told it can be very, very painful if you're not paying close attention to how you're spending the government's money. So I would pass that along to you as.
Can you expand on that? I mean, do you use certain software? Is there certain things that you do? I mean, I've heard Peachtree, I mean, especially when you were small, or because I've talked to a couple of firms, and I'm like, when you get that phase one, you better start tracking your dollars like it's a cost plus fixed fee contract, so when they come in and audit. But is there certain insight you can give them with the types of software, the types of tools?
Our CFO at the time reached out to the defense audit folks and went and met with them and did a couple meetings. What are you looking for? What kind of system should we be putting in place? We were tiny at the time, so we kind of did it from scratch. And now we're very adept at it. And listen, as a small company, cash flow is king. You're relying on that government payment to come in on time. You better be focused on every I being dotted when you're putting in your request for payment.
That's a good input. And you're accounting for a lot of the DCAA folks, and there's DCMA, DCAA, They won't talk to you until you have a government contract. But once you have one, or maybe they will, but a lot of them kind of don't want to. But once you have one, they will. And the earlier you can get them out there to do audits and things like that, the better off you are. You know, they are scary. They can destroy and ruin your month, if not more. But it's part of the price of doing business with the government. And the earlier you can kind of set it up, the better off you are.
The final comment I'd have is I've heard a lot today, and appropriately, that even at the very early stages, you need to be thinking about what this product is going to be and how you're going to commercialize it. And I'm sure everybody here at this table has proven to someone that what they make is different and makes a difference, and that it can be produced at an attractive price in a scaled way. And that needs to be part of your thought process from the first day.
Mark?
I just want to follow up on Alan's point, particularly for people who are doing this the first time, their first SBIR tech, the successful one, and especially with a granting agency where you don't have the structure of a contract officer trying to nickel and dime you before you get the award, which is a less controlled environment. Make sure that you don't get so involved in the technology of the proposal and doing the proposal that you don't pay attention and learn the basics of what the indirect rate is all about. If you understand the purpose of the indirect rate and what's involved and what isn't involved, and that you need to have a view of the total costs of the total company, you'll be in much better position when it comes to setting up your accounting system and setting up something that has a chance of getting you through the process such that you don't wind up with a three-room board for some indeterminate period for fraud or just bad.
And can you give us insight on where you think the best places to get the rules on, or what's indirect, what's direct, and all those kind of things? Is there places? Jim? Yeah. Okay.
The best place is to read the federal acquisition regulations. I would suggest for
Wait, that's like 3,000 pages.
the part that applies to what's allowable cost and unallowable cost is not 3,000.
And you can probably Google a lot of that stuff and pull it up to
I
get
would
the right
suggest
sections.
literally reading the
Right, no, you have to read it and
exactly
get the right
about
sections and read them, right.
allowable cost, and that you should set up your chart of accounts to mirror every bit of the part with unallowable and allowable cost.
Mark?
I think the simplest for beginners and trimmer is something that the NSF has on their site called the new awardees guide, or prospective awardees guide, and it gives you simple examples. The rules in terms of internal R&D, IRAD, vary somewhat across agencies and do it, but if you want to get the fundamental basics, that kind of is a good, real base level starting point from which you then can do.
And you can
Yeah.
also start to capture with IRAD, and I hadn't thought about that, but capturing what you are developing with your own nickel is an important thing, especially later on when you want to go back and say, hey, yeah, I did this under SBIR, you got a royalty-free license to that, but this part of the algorithm I developed on my own beforehand, and you've got documentation to prove that.
I'll expand here as well. We mentioned DCAA earlier, and we had them come in and do an audit early, on our SBR phase 1, and they set up an ICE model as part of their normal auditing requirements. And then we had a consultant come in subsequently, a couple years later, and use the same ICE model. So we had basically a DOE sanctioned, or not DOE, but a government sanctioned auditing tool that we could use as we were going along to track all of our costs, and that was a huge help. And the second point I'll make, going back to Mark's point on the indirect rates, one of the things that we do kind of regret from the early proposals was that we gave such incredible value to DOE on our phase 1 that we really left a lot of money on the table, unfortunately. And so now that we've had a chance to go back and, losing those few early proposals, helped teach us that, we've gotten much more exposure to what acceptable rates are. Our president and CEO, Ed Sawyer, is now a DOE reviewer for a number of proposals in our field. And again, we get to see the rates that are being processed both positively and negatively to get just, again, a better frame of reference for what is acceptable and finding that it's sometimes surprisingly high. So don't be afraid to go after it sometimes.
Any other comments from the group, that lessons learned or whatever you want?
I've got one lesson. I'm sure you've probably heard it before, but before you take pen to paper, call up the agency that you're working with, talk to the program officer, and pitch your idea. It can save you an awful lot of time. If they're interested in it, they'll give you encouragement, they'll help you tweak it, and they'll help you focus to the right agency, or even, even to the right study group. They're really good. They're out there to help you. That's definitely been my experience. If you get well, I don't really think that idea is appropriate for us, don't push it. It's not going to go anywhere.
Just on the bookkeeping side, we found, I agree with all the comments up here, and we just use QuickBooks and then an Excel spreadsheet to track time, and we've been audited, and that's passed. So you don't need a huge expensive software package. I think QuickBooks is sufficient for what you need. I think one thing to keep in mind on the SBIR side is, at least we haven't found that the SBIR will necessarily, that they do a good job of connecting you with the end people who will use your product. You really have to rely on yourself for commercialization. The SBIR program is a great way to fund development, to do things that you want to do with your product. But it's not going to go anywhere if you're developing it and then you hope that they're going to transition it. That's really work that you have to do, and that just takes some hard work. On the beta side, just a quick comment, we're starting to work with a Navy SEAL aviator, and what we found is we really have an alpha, very, very, very rough, and we found private pilots much more willing to work with that than a special operator. And so I think when you think about your testers in the military, you do have to get a good picture of how finished it has to be. In our case, we're finding that beta has to be pretty well finished before they'll test it. Because if you take something too rough, you can get rejected out the gate just because of the appearance.
Where do you find the acceptable rates for discipline and education?
I know, I know our contracting officers have them, but I think you can Google them it's usually the local area, and then it's the different disciplines. And then so I bet if you Google it, it'll give you standard rates for, a chemical engineer doing this type of work in the Vermont area. I don't even think that's federal, but I don't know. Do you guys? I thought, I know our contracting folks have a source, and I don't know what that is, though. But I know they look up, and it kind of gives you local areas and different disciplines. And part of it is, it's what you're paying your people. So you can't say, this guy is, $80 an hour, but you're paying him $40. So I would, you guys might have more insight on that, because I just read the stuff now, because I don't even do that anymore. But.
Well, are you talking about the negotiated rate? Because the overhead that Mark was talking
I'm
about?
just talking more individuals, right? And what's the rates to charge for
there's
individuals?
There's tons of things online. If you just look up their Department of Labor statistics, and there's a whole bunch.
But
and
usually you charge what the guy's making, and we'll just throw it out. If you say it's $200 and it's a guy that should only be making $50, we'll say, no, you're not getting $200. But it should be what he is. And then from the overheads, and the key advice on there is just don't come out with 50%, round it off, make it 48.3. But there are places to look at what the rates are and do your best job of coming up what fits into the overhead box, heating, building costs, all that, and then what's the direct labor charges. And and I think the NSF site is one of the better ones that has some of that information. And then there's really a lot of DCMA type folks that have retired now that are doing consulting work that, in a quick little bit and some Quicken books, it's not that hard, but you want to know early on what the rules are so you follow them.
If you're a newbie and the company really isn't operating because
actuals kick in, those rates will change as the actuals kick in. That's right. All right, we're going to close, right? We got another question.
No question. I'd also like to suggest that you can use the GSA schedule to check for some comparative rates to see what the government's already agreed for certain types of labor. That's not the stuff.
Right.
And I also want to mention on the pitching technical program pitching. If anybody wants help with what your pitch should be and how to kind of narrow down, instead of a 15 or 20 minute explanation of what you're doing, get it down to basically a 3-minute or 4-minute pitch. Use my office so I can help you do that. It's part of what I do.
Right, and we love quad charts. Sometimes it's great to send us a quad chart and say, look, I want to talk to you, here's kind of what it is, and I can snapshot, look at it, and kind of get a feel. These guys didn't need to come here today. I think they kind of know part of this program, so they did, and I think that's a great appreciation for the program, but I really want to appreciate and thank them for the time, because they didn't need to come here, so thank you, gentlemen.